Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board, Barb Desjardins, also Mayor of the Township of Esquimalt, and you'll see Marianne and I doing the hat trick all night with the two hats. But I want to welcome you to this joint board council meeting. This year we're within the right time frame of doing this, having this meeting, and the board will be presenting the budget. Finance Chair Elizabeth Cull will be the presenter with her backup staff. And we welcome questions and comments from all sides. That's what this is about, and you'll get another presentation at your council meetings again in the future when you're doing your actual budget deliberations. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Mayor Alto, to do the territorial acknowledgement.
Thank you very much, Mayor Desjardins. It's always a pleasure to join you and be here with this austere and august group of people. And whenever we gather, I know all of us together, we always take a moment before we do our work to reflect on the lands and the oceans that surround them that we have the privilege to join together and work on. Here today in Victoria, we are on the traditional and current territories of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees Nation and the Esquimalt Nation. And we recognize the fact that we have this privilege by due of their incredible stewardship over millennia, and we thank them not just for that, but for their ongoing willingness and generosity to be able to work with us, to learn with us, to teach us, and to be willing to look ahead and try and collectively imagine how we can all make these lands and the oceans that surround them a better place for all of us. I know that all of you share that, and that in each day I hope that you will take a moment to find some personal significance to those words, and that when you do that, that you open your minds and your heart and your arms and you say Hachkasiyam, Hachkasiyam, and thank and give homage to all of your friends, all of your family, and all of our relations.
Thank you, Co-Chair Alto. Before we start, last year when we did this, it was almost like we were all deer in the headlights because we were brand new to this sort of format. So what I'd like to do is to break the ice a little bit and introduce ourselves. You can say one sentence about your past year or your direction you want to go forward, whatever, respectful and welcoming. And I'm going to start with Councillor Cavan.
Oh, I have no idea my one sentence. So I'm Councillor Cavans, Duncan Cavans from Esquimalt. First year just started on, second year just started on council, and looking forward to working with both councils and the police board on this important topic.
Hi everybody, Dave Thompson, City of Victoria. Same thing, first year councillor. Haven't really thought about my remarks yet, but happy to be here and happy to work with all of you on this.
Hello everyone, I'm Tim Kituri, Victoria Esquimalt Police Board. Joined in May, so brand new to this. My one sentence, I got a speech prepared here. Just looking forward to hearing everyone and working together. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Krista Loudon from Victoria, and I'm happy to be here. It's been an interesting first year. I'm not sure if I should really go here, but you know what, I'm just going to say it. I don't want a divorce.
Councillor Natalie Rochford from Township of Esquimalt. Today is 1 year to the day actually that we were sworn in. That's very exciting. And I just want to make a note of appreciation for Victoria and Esquimalt Police and all the hard work you folks do to keep our community safe.
I'm Shirley Huber. This is I've been on the board 4.5 years for Victoria Esquimalt Police Board. Happy to be spending the evening discussing budget with everyone here.
Good evening, Tim Morris, Esquimalt Council. I feel really quite old because I've actually been around since 2011 doing this process with budgets and policing, and it's certainly evolved over time, and certainly our vicpd has met the challenges that have been put front with them year after year. And we'll see how tonight goes and what our challenges are ahead. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Marg Gardner. I'm a councillor, City of Victoria. And I guess we were sworn in 53 weeks ago. And it's been a very interesting year. In the last 5 years, I've had to call upon police services more than in the previous many decades of my life. And I quite appreciate the City of Victoria Police and Victoria's Police Department. And it's more than an important service. It's a service that is needed in order for us to live with understanding that we have someone out there who has a duty of care to us and respects us as people who live here and people right now, especially in the City of Victoria, in so many parts that need their services. Thank you.
I am Michaela Hayes with the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board. I think I can just talk. With the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board. I'm really looking forward to the presentation this evening, and I thank our Finance Chair, Elizabeth Call, and Steve Hercombe, McDowell, and everybody for all their hard work on this. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Hellowell, councillor with Esquimalt. Just really happy that we have these sort of avenues to come together. I think we often, there are some structural considerations in the relationship between all the parties here, and sometimes I think if we can kind of just get everybody in a room and sort of put everything on the table and have those discussions, it's how we're going to find a path forward, whatever that would be. So I just really appreciate, while we may not solve the world here this evening, I think it starts those relationships and building those connections so that we can have those discussions.
Thank you. Susan Kim, City of Victoria Councillor, she, her. My only comment is that I think it's quite bold of the chairs to let politicians be limited to one sentence.
My mistake.
Good evening. My name's Paul Farrow. I'm on the Victoria Esquimalt Police Board. Been on there for since February, so relatively a newbie. I come out of the labor movement where relationships are important, and I think that this is a good opportunity to enhance and build relationships. So it's nice to meet a lot of people here tonight, and I'm looking forward to our discussions. Thank you.
And I'm Suzanne Thompson. I'm Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer for Victoria. And I'm here, I'm eagerly listening to all your comments, and I will take lots of notes.
Good evening, everyone. Jocelyn Jenkins, City Manager, City of Victoria. I just want to say that I feel like we're at a point of peak collaboration. It's just a refreshing and wonderful approach that I think everybody's brought to tonight. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Horan, Chief Administrative Officer in Esquimalt. It's been 13 months. It felt like a sprint at the beginning, juggling a bunch of things, and now I'm slowing down a little bit, but still running a long ways. It's been wonderful working with the two communities and just participating in this kind of activity. So thank you very much.
Ian Irvin, Director of Finance for the Township of Esquimalt. Much like Suzanne, I'll be taking a lot of notes and just observing the dynamics and listening to the conversation. And it's by no means my first meeting of these.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Gillen. I am a board member since 2019. I was in Charlotte for 4.5 years. I'm past governor's chair. Many of you I've worked with during several different community initiatives. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with you once again. I do know from each of you, my feelings, that you're all passionate, you love your communities. As somebody who works and plays at both Esquimalt and Victoria, I understand your needs, and I know our board does as well in wellness and leadership. So I really appreciate you being here. And to jump off Jocelyn's comments, I do see a lot of collaboration happening in the past year, and I really feel that energy, and I wish we will continue that. So thank you all for being here, and I know the board is very much welcome and listening to your feedback, and that's what it is tonight. It's really get your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Boardman, Councillor for the Township of Esquimalt. I enjoy every opportunity I get to sit in a room with our friends from the City of Victoria, and I know that we have more similarities than we have differences. Looking forward to the discussion.
Chris says hello. I'm Holly Corright. I am on the Victoria Esquimalt Police Board. I'm the Esquimalt rep on that board, and I've
months, 5 months, not a great deal of time. And I would like to use my one sentence to thank Elizabeth for her really hard work and the fact that she really dove into this with consultative process in mind. And I think that it was a really great change, and she's worked really, really hard to make sure that she's approaching it with a lot of curiosity. So I would love it if everyone could keep that in mind and be very thankful for the process that she's gone through.
Hi everyone, Jeremy Cardona. I am a City of Victoria Councillor and CRD Director, and it's really a pleasure to be here tonight. It's just finishing up our first year on council, my first year, and it was the most interesting and fascinating year of my life, and it also seems to be the fastest year. It's hard to believe that it's been 12 months since we were in this room eating the little sandwiches with no crust on them. I guess that never changes. In any case, it's really pleased to be here with the vicpd, with the board, and with my fellow councillors from Victoria and also Esquimalt. A number of Esquimalt councillors, we've had a chance to spend time together in Vancouver and in Toronto at UBCM and FCM, but don't get a chance to be in the same room together all that often, so it's really great to be here with our cousins in Esquimalt, so thank you.
Good evening, I'm Acting Deputy Chief Jamie McRae with the Victoria Police Department. I have been on the senior leadership team for many years and have exactly 4 days as Acting Deputy Chief. Happy to be here, good to see everybody. Thanks.
Hello everyone, Jason Laidman, I'm the other deputy with VicPD. Been here a number of times, nice to be back into the room, and I was reflecting that we only actually have a half hour before this thing starts. Maybe we should open the door an hour before, and that's where some of the work gets done when we're meeting and greeting everyone. So I enjoyed catching up with a few. Thank you and good evening.
Good evening everyone, I'm Del Manick, Chief of the Victoria Police Department. Happy to be here, and I'm pleased to get the process started. And again, there'll be many, many meetings and a lot of discussion, and today is step one of many. And I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to my leadership team, who is, I couldn't do the work that I do without their support and without their leadership. Thank you.
Steve Hercombe, I'm the controller for the police department. This is my 8th joint board council now, and I still haven't figured out how to keep everyone awake during my presentation. So hand that over to Elizabeth because she's better at it than me.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Cull, and I guess I've been on the board now for 6 months, which means I probably have another 6 months where I can get away with saying, oh, I don't know, I'll get back to you, I'll ask Steve, he'll tell me. But eventually I will know more about what I'm trying to do here. But what I know I'm trying to do is develop a process that's more collaborative, and a number of you have already commented on that. Thank you, Jocelyn, for saying it's the peak, but I don't think it's the peak yet. I think we have more to go, so thank you.
Colette?
Hi, I'm the Chief Assistant and the Board Assistant.
I'm Sarah Holloway, I'm the Deputy Corporate Officer for the Township of Esquimalt.
I'm Cheryl Major, I'm the Director of Community Engagement Division at VicPD.
I'm Michael Brown, I'm with the Esquimalt Division.
Hi, Colin Brown, I'm with the Executive Services Division, which is typically all things legal for us, so Police Act, FOI, human rights, etc.
And I'm Dan Phillips, the Director of Information Management.
All right, and there's one strange face on the other side of the table, but I believe you're with the media. Am I correct? No, please introduce yourself.
Just a member of the public.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I do want to provide regrets from Chris Coleman, Stephen Hammond, Ken Armour from Esquimalt, and Matt Dell. And logistics, bathrooms are across the foyer. And so that's it for us, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Cull.
Make sure everything is on. Yes, thank you, Mayor. And it's great to see everybody here. It's nice to see both councils together, having talked to you individually a couple of times now. We're here tonight to present the budget that the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board has approved for discussion. And I stress the fact that it's the board, it's our budget. It's not the department's budget, it's the board's budget. We think this is a good budget, and we think it's a budget that meets your priorities and supports a safe community for all of us. So we're here tonight to answer your questions and to discuss your concerns and explore the challenges that we collectively face in getting it right for our community. And I want to assure you, this is not the end of the process. I'll be saying that over and over again, but we are going to talk and meet and discuss and explore this until we come to a point where hopefully we agree, or at least we rest. Okay? I'm on the agree part. I'm optimistic. I've always been an optimist. So I want you to ask questions tonight, but I won't be surprised if you come back next week or the week afterwards with more. And we're here to continue that conversation as long as we need to. This is just another step on this collaborative process for the 2024 budget. So our goal is to come up with a budget that we both support, both councils support, the department supports, and that our residents agree is the kind of budget we need to have a safe and livable community. Isn't that what we're all here for, a safe and livable community? So I'm going to go through slides. I'm not going to read what's on every slide, so I encourage you to take a look at it, but I will talk to the content of it. So this is the outline for what we're going to cover tonight. I'm going to talk to the first two items on the slide, and then I will hand it over to the chief and to Steve Hercombe, who will deal with the details of it all, and we'll probably answer most of your questions. And we'll look forward to having your questions at the end of the whole presentation. So I want to talk about the process for a minute, because the process is part of the challenge we have in putting this budget together. We have two unique communities with very different needs, and we're a board for both of them. That's unusual. We're the only police board in the province that police board in the province that serves two municipalities with one department. We're also, unique in that we have the framework agreement. It's a very unique, quotation marks around that, very unique and sometimes very challenging document, but we have to pay attention to that too. And like most budgeting situations, we have to balance priorities with limited resources. And I don't think there's anyone around this table that hasn't had to struggle with that at some point, either at the council or in their businesses or in their private life. It's a fact of life, but it is a challenge for us as we go forward. So this is a slide that shows the current budgeting process. It's a process that's been followed for years. Normally, the budget cycle starts in April, and the police department starts to work its budgets up. They talk to the various divisions. It goes to the finance committee. We start consultation with your senior staff. And then ultimately with the councils, and then finally we arrive at this point. But this process isn't just a matter of going through the motions. Governance boards like ours generally, stay pretty high level. We're a policy. We don't get into the operational things. But this is the one case where we ask a lot of questions. We probe. We ask why. We ask, is it enough? Is it too much? It's the one place where we actually get into the weeds when we're doing oversight. And we hope that the councils will agree this is not just oversight about costs, because costs are really important. Our primary role, as the Police Act requires, is to ensure adequate and effective policing services provided to our two municipalities. And it is often the case, and is the case this year, it sometimes means investing in additional resources. Back to the way forward. So what we're doing, what we hope to do next year is change the process so that we start earlier, we're more collaborative, we involve more consultation with community organizations, and we come up with a process that involves multi-year budgeting. So you'll see a different process starting next year, and one of the things we hope we can do is invite you and your staff to help us develop that process. We're not going to go away into a room and come up with a process for a new budget. We want to talk to you about, okay, what do you need to make this work? So I want to talk now a little bit about what drives our budget. And this is a slide that depicts our strategic plan. And I want to tell you that this is the foundation of what we do, pretty well everything we do. It has to fit with our strategic plan. We want to make sure that all of our activities, our budget, our policing resources, everything is focused on achieving organizational excellence. And we do that while we pursue the goals of supporting community safety and enhancing public trust. And I think that the way that we put the budget together is part of organizational excellence, it's part of support of community trust, and it's also part of community safety, as much as the other things that we do to enhance those in our community. These goals go hand in hand. We have other strategic considerations, and those are the divisional plans, provincial public safety priorities. And one point to note is that when we put our divisional plans together, we don't just carry on from where we were last year. We go back and start. Every line item has to be built from the ground up. So I know some budgeting I've been involved with in the past, you look at last year's, you do a few little tinkering around the edges and you say you need more. That is not the way we do our budgets. We look at it really carefully to make sure that we are examining what we're doing and making sure that what we're doing makes sense. So all of the strategic considerations that are shown up here, council priorities and the priorities of the community, the provincial government, all of those are important and they drive our budget. The provincial safety priorities, I put those up there on that slide, they come out of the minister's mandate letter, and I believe also we took it from some recent comments that the Premier made about what the public safety priorities were. We have to pay attention to that. So while we asked you your priorities, and we certainly want to try to make sure we address those, we also have to meet the priorities with the requirements of the provincial government. And you'll see by looking at this list, most of this is outside of our control, outside of your control. So we're looking to the province to be able to take leadership on these issues, because I don't think that we can create the kind of safe community that we're talking about if we can't get help from the province to do that. Feedback from both councils. When we talked to you before, we gave you what you told us each individually. This slide shows where there's agreement. So I won't read this list out, but you'll see that most of this, no matter whether you're sitting there from a Esquimalt Council or Victoria Council, you should recognize it and say, yeah, that's what we told them. And so we tried to build that into our budget. We also noticed that there were some common concerns coming from the two councils. Again, a lot of overlap there. And I'll tell you, we're concerned about these things too. These are concerns that we worry about all the time while we're trying to put together our programs, our strategies, and our budget. And we also asked you, what can we improve? What can we do more of? What should we change, how we're doing it? Again, there's a lot of overlap between the two municipalities, and these are things that we agree on and we are working on. We did some other community consultation this year. We started late, and we didn't have enough time to do the kind of comprehensive process that we would have liked to have done. So it was a bit ad hoc, and we actually took the finance committee members and said, who do you know out there? Who do you have contacts with? Go and talk to them. And we went out and talked to people, and we got some idea about what they were concerned about. Beside those three organizations there, we also talked to a number of nonprofits that are dealing with homelessness and mental health issues. So while I won't tell you that it was a well-rounded list of all of the voices that we should hear in the community, we made an attempt, and next year we will do a rigorous process to define exactly who we should be talking to and consulting with sufficiently early in the budget that we can take those concerns into consideration. But the interesting thing was the priorities of the community groups were pretty well the same as the priorities we heard from council. So I guess that's a good thing. It means that you're tapped into your community, you know what's going on out there, and they have the similar concerns to what you do. So maybe a little more specific when it was related to businesses in the downtown or people in various neighborhoods, but there was a lot of consistency across the two councils and the community groups. So at this point, I'd like to switch over to the chief, because we're going to get now into some of the details on the budget, and then I'll come back at the very end.
Well, thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. And I'll just, the next 6 slides, I want to just take you through from an operational perspective. So this is a slide that you would be familiar with when I provide my quarterly updates to you. It's, we pride ourselves in having an open, transparent, and accountable police organization. If you go to vicpd.ca, you will see the Open VicPD Hub. It's a one-step hub to get key information when it comes to crime statistics and public safety data. One of the things that I wanted to just point out to you is the Crime Severity Index, and we've circled it for you for the City of Victoria and now separate stats that we have for the township. But there you can see it's 2022 data, but you see comparisons to 2021 and also to 2020 in where we rest with the Crime Severity Index for 2022. I can tell you that the BC average on there might be difficult to see on the slide here is 100. And the VicPD Crime Severity Index is at 157, and the Esquimalt Crime Severity Index number is at 42. One of the things we do talk about is the workload demands on our officers. I can tell you that the average caseload in British Columbia is 33. These are 2021 numbers. We don't have anything more current than 2021. And you can see that at 49, the Victoria Police Department caseload per officer is 48% higher than the BC average. So higher caseload means busier department, and it also means additional workload pressures that our staff have to face on a regular basis. Some of the organizational pressures, and there really will be nothing new here that councils haven't seen before, but our workload demands continue to rise. There continues to be downloading on the Victoria Police Department. The higher concentration of supportive services located within the City of Victoria certainly adds policing responsibilities much more frequently than what we've seen in the past, and that is a challenge. The trauma and work-related injuries. This is a key concern, and I know that our board is deeply concerned about this, and we're doing everything we can. In fact, I'll talk a little bit later about some of the changes that we've made to support our people better. Continually evolving investigative complexity through case law and through reporting standards. New standards that have been released over the number of years on missing persons, domestic violence, how major case management principles must be used in complex investigations. And coming next year is new standards on intimate partner violence. So all of these add more reporting mechanisms and greater structure and require more steps to be taken by officers. Recruiting, retention, and reintegration challenges continue to pose a challenge, and the frequency and complexity of public protests and critical incidents. It really does deplete our resources. Many of these protests are labor intensive around road closures and making sure that we're keeping protest groups and now counter-protest groups that show up against the protest groups, making sure that all sides are safe and are able to be safe, peaceful, and lawful in their protest activity. This is something that I've touched on in the budget consultation process for councils. It's really important to talk about some of the actions that we have taken to date. So under the leadership of Inspector Michael Brown, who is a project lead on the restructure process that we undertook in late 22, implemented in January of 2023, it is paying significant dividends for the Victoria Police Department. I can tell you that the teams are smaller. We've got more officers working around busy periods of time. It's certainly a more efficient deployment model. We've got a coordinated effort on our outreach teams. We've created a new section for the general investigation section, and increased proactive policing in projects, whether it's retail theft, whether it was the recent arsons that we were seeing, or foot patrols. We're able to provide that level of connection to our community. Now, there's always going to be a casualty. You can't be everything to everyone at every time, and unfortunately one of those things was the collapsing of our beat and bike unit. Civilianization of human resources. So I was sharing with a few of you that we are actually going from 6 inspectors down to 5, and we are going to be civilianizing our 6th inspector to a civilian HR professional coming in the new year. Investing in employee wellness and psychological supports, having an in-house psychologist, I can tell you has been a game changer. Having Daisy, our occupational stress intervention dog, in the new year, we're going to be moving towards annual wellness checks for all of our staff that are required, are really looking at proactive measures to keep our staff healthy and making sure that we're supporting their mental health and well-being. And how are we containing costs? So I can tell you that the reorg, although we didn't really realize the impact that it was going to have, in addition to the morale, one of the key positive impacts that it has is it has actually significantly reduced our overtime. This helps with officer wellness. I can tell you that this really doesn't translate to a budget reduction because our overtime was much, much higher than the normal levels that we had budgeted for, but it is a good news story that I think is worth talking about and sharing. We're always looking at IT efficiencies, and we're looking at leveraging our Microsoft products to reduce the reliance on other products to reduce our overall costs. We're also running a pilot for a fleet lease program. We think that this is the better way to go, and we could see up to 10% reduction in our overall costs for fleet management. Our human resource, we implemented a new information system, so it has really reduced duplication. It is extremely efficient and effective, and we're just realizing the benefits of having a new system. And we're going to be going public on a newly developed online crime reporting tool. We're just putting it out together. We'll be sharing that with the public, making sure that the public feel comfortable when they're reporting a crime and they're not put on hold, and we want to make sure that we're capturing the data when we need to capture it. I'd now like to turn it over to our controller, Mr. Steve Herco. Steve?
So there's no doubt that we continue to face significant cost pressures. Wage inflation is putting tremendous pressure on the cost to simply maintain the status quo. Salaries and benefits are a significant portion of our overall budget and therefore a high impact item. Changes were made to compensation for standby as well as the introduction of parental leave. 2024 is the first full year that we'll have this implemented, and although costly, these benefits are essential to remain competitive with other police agencies during a challenging time for police recruitment and retention. Despite high turnover due to retirements and resignations, we are maintaining staffing levels, but to continue to do so, we must invest in recruitment and retention so we do not fall behind. Lastly, we have a significant increase from ECOM for the delivery of 911 and dispatch services as a result of wage and staffing increases, as well as enhancements to training and necessary technological upgrades. So the overall budget increase is 6.86%. Of this, 6.02% represents the cost to maintain the status quo with no additional resources. As you'll see on the next slide, this increase comprises a select number of items. Personnel costs represent nearly 80% of our budget. Therefore, wage inflation is always a significant cost driver. The board has also approved the addition of 4 staffing positions, representing an increase to the budget of less than 1%. Lastly, several items not approved from the 2023 budget are under consideration by the province. They may support all or none of these items, so they are not included in the budget number. However, for transparency, the potential impact, if they are approved, has been disclosed as a separate item. So just quickly, I just wanted to make one quick apology on this one. The version that you had a slightly different numbers. We had a version error problem there, and you will notice up on the screen here that the non-recoverable overtime increase is actually 0.12 million, not 0.32 million, which is a 0.18% increase, and all other increases are 0.32 million, which is a 0.48% increase. The single most significant cost element is wage increases. Payroll makes up most of our budget, and cost of living increases are unavoidable. The budget includes funds for wage inflation, as well as changes to compensation for standby pay required to keep our pay and benefits in line with our comparative groups. Also included are costs to backfill the Special Municipal Constable Program to provide coverage for vacation and sick time. This initiative has transferred some of our administrative workload formerly performed by police officers to lower paid special constables, creating efficiencies within the organisation and relieving some of the workload pressures on our officers. The budget also includes the cost for an additional 3 police and 1 civilian position. Business cases have been included in the budget package. There will be another significant increase to the ECOM contract to accommodate wage and staffing increases, as well as improvements to training and equipment upgrades. This is a much more substantial increase than they had previously forecast. My colleagues at other police agencies and I have been working with ECOM to understand why these costs were underestimated and ensure that a rigorous process is in place to provide reasonable future cost increases. Equipment upgrades are required for handguns and tasers to bring recommended upgrades. This was part of a thorough review and represents the final phase of implementation. The overtime budget allows for wage inflation. Additionally, we have included overtime for the newly created General Investigation Support Unit. This unit provides investigative support for patrol for low and medium complexity files. The creation of this unit has provided better support to patrol and increased proactive police work. Finally, an increase in the recruitment budget will fund 4 targeted marketing campaigns to attract qualified police officers to the department. So 4 additional staffing resources are included in the provisional budget, representing 3 police officers and 1 civilian position. We realize the councils face a difficult choice in making their budget decisions, but these additional resources represent less than a 1% increase in the budget. The reintegration sergeant will bring officers back to productive work and help prevent costly longer-term injuries, using approaches that have been proven to work and making some headway into improving our support to employees, an area identified as needing improvement. The training constable will address the increasing complexities and requirements of police training, protecting our officers and the public. ICE stands for Internet Child Exploitation. This position will enhance our capacity in an area that directly impacts children's safety. Lastly, we manage a large volume of public requests for privacy and freedom of information. Meeting legislative requirements consumes a considerable amount of resources, and an additional analyst is needed to keep up with the workload. Business cases have been provided for each of the additional resources. And at this point, I will hand you back to our Finance Chair, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Steve. And I think you've got the outline of our budget now. You've got paper in front of you that will probably cause you to have a lot of questions. But I want to say that we think we put the best budget forward that we could possibly create. I'm not going to kid you. I'm not going to say this budget's going to do everything that you want, everything that we want. We have to work with what we think we can do. We have to work with the resources that we think are reasonable. So there'll be still things that you'll be saying, well, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Well, we have to figure out what our priorities are because we can't do everything. But I do think this is a good budget to start with, and beginning next year, as I've said several times, we're going to do things a little differently. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to have a 5-year staffing plan so that you can see where things are coming right now instead of having it come in each year, where we come in with requests for new positions. You can be able to see how they may flow over a 5-year period. And I think that will help, along with the financial forecasts that will project the needs for adequate resources over the same time frame. So in closing, I just want to say I think our objectives are the same in terms of what we want from our police service in Victoria, what we want for our communities. And I think if we can reach a point where we all support the budget, we will be able to achieve that. We'll be able to get our collective goals realized for all of us. I have one final request, I guess, of you, and that is that we have 2 municipalities who have to approve the budget. And we know it's a challenge, but we ask you to work really hard to see if you can both approve this budget in full. It's the only way we can move forward with a budget that makes sense is if we have both of our municipal councils supporting the budget. So as I've said, it's not the end of our conversation. We will talk again, and we'll talk as long as we have to until we get to a point where we feel we've done the job or can't go any further. So over to you again, Mayor, for questions. Are we taking them from our chairs or from where do you want us to take questions?
I think it's best if you're all up front. So if you can, the team can head back. Questions? Councilor Caradona.
Thanks, and through your chair. Just wanted to get some clarification on what the budgetary line items were that were remaining from the Section 27.3 appeal. And if any of those are duplicative to what's requested in this budget.
Certainly. So there was a total of 1.99 million and that was not approved in the budget last year. And it can be broken down into 3 areas basically. So there are the positions. So we had 4 civilian positions, 3 police officer positions. We had a body-worn pilot project. And then the other ones were operational budget items. There was a capital reserve funding transfer, professional services, retirements, and building maintenance. If I have my computer, I could bring them up for you. I don't know if I can plug in. I can run through the numbers. I'll just call out the numbers.
Can you clarify again? You said that there was 4 officers and 3 civilians, so there were 7 positions?
So there was 4 civilians and 3 police officers. So the 3 police officers were just classified as additional police officers. We didn't define which positions they were, and that was $425,000.
And that doesn't count the 4 additional officers requested, so there would be, in theory, if the 9.81% went through, there'd be 11 new officers?
Yeah, in theory, there would be 6 new police officers, and then there would be 5 civilians.
For a total of 11?
Yes.
Okay. I also had a question, if I could, for Director Thompson, who's eating a cookie right now. Sorry to be on the spot, Suzanne. Can you give us, in Victoria, a sense of what, and maybe this is not a question for tonight, but certainly thinking about how 9.81% translates to our property tax increase?
So through the chair, without the Section 27, the rough estimate for our tax increase would be, for our share of the police budget, would be about 2.4%. That's the tax side of things. And if memory serves, and I haven't done the math on the Section 27 in a while, and this is the full year impact as opposed to what council was considering last year, I believe for us it's about 1.3 on top of that 2.4.
Okay, so somewhere between 2.4 and 3.7. Okay, thanks very much. I'll leave my questions there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halliwell.
Thank you very much. I have sort of a fairly broad question, and it's for the police board. In the opening comments, Director Cull mentioned that the police board has a requirement for adequate and effective policing under the Police Act, and that they use that as part of their guide and sort of asking questions and reviewing the police board budget. And could the director or someone else on the board sort of define, it's something that we struggle with in council, is I can't necessarily say what's adequate and effective for policing, and I'm wondering how the board uses that. How do they define adequate and effective, and how do they sort of use that in reviewing and making decisions on what budget to put forward?
Well, it's not defined anywhere, so that is a challenge for all parties involved in this. We look at our resources and where we're falling down, or maybe falling down on our own expectations or your expectations in providing services in different places. We look at the statistics that the chief put up there about crime rates, workloads with our staff. We look at things like our staff wellness, if I can use that term, because a lot of what's been happening in policing, and I'm sure this is no surprise to you, has put a lot of stress on our police officers. And we want to, we can't provide safe and effective policing with police officers who aren't healthy. So we look at a bunch of things like that, but we also look at the kinds of issues that I put up, I spoke about in my presentation. We look at our strategic goals, we look at your priorities, we look at community priorities. We're trying to put together a lot of pieces to come up with something that we can look at and you can look at and say, yeah, this does it. It may not be perfect, but this does what we need, and we're going in the right direction. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chief? No.
Okay, thank you. If I can have one follow-up. Thank you for that. That's helpful, and I appreciate that it's not defined because we have that challenge as well. The follow-up, I think, is one of the challenges we had last year going through the budget process, and I believe the City of Victoria did as well from what I gathered in sort of the public reports, is trying to reconcile the percentage increases that the board has put forward with what we thought was a reasonable and feasible tax increase, and a request back to the police board and back to the staff to help us prioritize the requests that came in, and how much of a challenge that was. And I can appreciate that it's a challenge, I absolutely can, and it's an expectation that we put on some of our other municipal departments as well, and some to greater success than others. But I guess my question is are we able to do any of that prioritization in what's put forward in this budget request? Should we come to a point where we aren't able to do a full 6.8? And maybe I'll just leave it there as the question. Thank you.
I think that's a matter for discussion with, ongoing discussion with us. I mean, we struggle internally in the police board to try to fit everything that we think we should do, we want to do, that our staff tell us we really should be putting in there, and knowing we can't do it all. So we understand what you're saying. It's a challenge. So, at some point we have to look at what's most important. But I think tonight it's a bit premature for us to start talking about that. I'd rather us explore what we've got here, what your concerns are, and then continue this discussion afterwards as we try to figure out how do we make it fit. Councillor Kim?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for this presentation. I feel like I'm finally getting it after seeing it for the third time. I have a whack of questions for you, so we'll just go through them. The first is, there was a mention of different priorities between province, public community, council. And so was there at any point in the budget where these priorities don't actually mesh, run up against each other, and as a result are causing an increase in the budget ask?
I don't, this last part of your question was, did it cause other pressures? I can't answer that. I don't think any of us can. It's kind of hard to know where that is. But I mean, there are conflicts between, I'm sure even around your council table, it takes you a while to agree. It takes a while for the two councils to come together. We only scratched the surface with what the community thought was important. And then we have the province telling us a whole pile of things they want us to do, which more and more they're not paying for, which is super frustrating. So maybe that's a place where meeting those priorities is adding to the inflationary pressures, things like e-com, or we were discussing it at Finance Committee today, training costs. You've got to do more training, but no, there's no more money from the province to do that. You have to find that within your budget. So there's a lot of pressures like that, but I would suspect that when you're looking at your budget, you've got the same problems.
That was a great segue into what was my last question. What are ways in which council can use their voices to push BC for funding or advocacy or something, so that we can actually be doing that preventative, proactive work, and that way you're not feeling this crunch every year?
Oh, I could get a list together for you.
Great, thank you.
But it's funny, we were talking about that today, about how do we as all the police boards in the province put pressure on the government about a particular item that was aggravating to us. I think that's something that we should discuss. I could see that fitting into the process next year, where we start looking at things and saying, we can't solve this on our own, so what do we say to the province, and how do we engage them in this, and being partners with us, which they are supposed to be, to help us do the best job we can.
Thank you. A great, again, segue. So with the process in the coming years, there was multi-year budgets. How many years are we talking? Are we thinking like a budget for 3, 5, and 10, or?
We haven't landed on that yet, so I'm kind of looking at our controller here, but the number we've been throwing around is 5.
Okay.
And that means that it becomes a rolling budget, you know, so that you can see 5 years out, and then the next year you see another year, another year, another year, so that, you know, you can, one of the beauties of multi-year budgeting was that there will be fewer surprises, because you'll know what's coming at you, and maybe the possibility to spread some costs over a period of time, not 5 years, but maybe over 2 years or something like that, so it's not quite as big a hit immediately.
How are the other police departments in the province responding to the cost of e-com? Because we can't be the only ones, right?
Yeah, so I keep in contact with my peers quite regularly. So a number of us have reached out to e-com. We've had a couple of meetings, and we have another one scheduled to get into the weeds a bit of what the decision-making process was behind this. I mean, I know some of this, there was errors. There were errors in the estimates that they made. They underestimated costs. But there are also a number of positions they're creating in there. So we want to get into like the weeds in terms of, I mean, I know we don't have any standing, but we want deeper questions answered. What's behind that. So we do have a group of the municipal police department finance people, and we've got together, and we do have an upcoming meeting in a couple of weeks with ECOM on that.
Thanks. I have a handful more, but I think I should respectfully pass it on, and we can come back. Yeah, thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Loudon? Sorry.
Loudon, like Broughton, with an L. Thank you so much, and through the chair, I recognize that we can't do it all, as you have noted. But the temporary suspension of the beaten bike section, like, that is a priority to both councils, and I'm wondering why that was included.
Well, the simple answer there is something had to give. If we're going to be creating a new general investigation section and really reimagine how we delivered frontline policing, we didn't have enough resources, but the reality was we did not have a fully functioning B team. We did not have a fully functioning, fully staffed bike unit. And usually when you want to be effective in those two areas, you have to have at least minimum staffing so you're able to go out into areas, saturate the area, and really have a lot of presence instead of being spread too thin. So yet we had these kind of floundering units trying to make it work, and we had burnout, anxiety, officers were, you know, our overtime was through the roof. There was a lot of kind of pressures on the organization, and again, it is one of the casualties of going ahead with a report, but I can tell you in the mid-year assessment that we just had presented to us at our senior leadership team, the overall results are overwhelmingly positive, because as I shared with your council when I presented my quarterly report, what we're seeing now is our largest division is the patrol division. It's staffed 24/7. It's got the youngest officers. When you first graduate from the academy, that's where officers are put to. And what they now have the ability, because we've got it staffed right and there's overlapping shifts, we are asking them to engage in proactive work, walk the beat, walk into businesses, and really do some proactive community policing at its core. We've never really had that luxury before. So although it's at the cost of a beaten bike section and a restructure, the positivity around that of instilling really good work habits in our people and really prioritizing the need to, which is one of both councils talked about, visibility and walking the beat and connecting. So we're doing it in a different way. We're actually having more impact, although we do need a portion of the bike patrol. And I can tell you that when we did the restructure, we actually still have many of those positions shadow marked on our org chart. So if we're at a position where we have enough staffing and we're able to return people back to work through our reintegration sergeant, which we're asking for in this budget, that we'll have more officers and we can start filling some of those vacant positions. So it's not eliminated, we just can't staff it right now because of all the other priorities that we have.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not gone, it's just looking a little bit different.
Correct.
As an example, if section 27 comes back in favor of the police board, would some of those resources be able to go towards creating that, bringing back the beat bikes?
That is a possibility, because the resources that are requested in that section 27, you heard there's 3 police positions out of the 7. They are generally increased the staffing, and our intent when we did that was for attrition and growth on the front lines, and not for any other positions. The positions that you see asked for this year are specific positions for a purpose that require an expertise. So we're talking apples and oranges, and so that certainly could be something that we could use. What we do is our Human Resources Division have a list of prioritized positions they want to fill, and that is something that is reviewed probably every month because it changes depending on where the vacancies lie, where the priorities lie, and if we were to be successful in that, those new positions would be slotted in, or those new officers would be slotted into where we thought was the greatest need at the time.
Okay, great. And there was another call for increased safety at night. So I'm wondering about, we're still going to see some foot patrol, we're still going to see some bikes. Can that be implemented at night? And I just want to give a quick example. When you came to our council, I mentioned this, that I'm the Burnside Gorge Councillor Liaison, and I went on a walk through Cecilia Ravine with a resident and with Constable Jenkins, and he noted that there's significant amount of, crime or crime potential along the Goose, but there's no way to patrol it in a car, so bikes are the way to do that. Would we be able to see bike patrol at nighttime on the Goose or on the ENN line in Esquimalt?
I think what we have to do is we have to be responsive to what the needs of the community are, both in the township and the city. And we are trying to build a capacity to be able to, it may be project work, it may not be forever in a day that we have so many patrols on so many nights, but it's no different than our Downtown Connect. It's no different than when we have significant challenges with retail theft, that we're able to really initiate a number of projects, really get a handle on what's going on, work with our courts, work with our partners, work with the Downtown Business Association or the Township Chamber, and making sure that we are doing our part, at least to alleviate some of the immediate public safety risks and crime trends that we're seeing. So we would continue to do that, but that certainly is an option. We want to be a police department that is nimble and is able to adjust our resources. We just don't have enough of the resources to be able to fully do that, but limping along, that is our goal, to make sure that we remain responsive.
Okay, we're trying to get there, but we can't do it all.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions, actually. I think the slide before this one, the resources added to the budget, I think there's 2 sets of numbers for each. Yeah, could you just tell us what the 2 different sets of numbers are for each of us? They represent?
Yeah, so there's a couple factors in there. I mean, some of them, the plan was to get them hired right away, just depending on the urgency and resourcing that we have available. And that's why you'll see that the first year cost is the first number. Some of them are lower because we would be hiring them until later in the year. And then there's also some, one-time costs attached usually for equipment and stuff like that.
I see. Okay, thanks. And then, sorry, took your time for my alarm to go off. I can't stop it. Turn off my phone. Turn it down. Sorry about that, everybody. The next one. The in-house developed online crime reporting tool. Is there no opportunity to buy these things off the rack? You happen to custom?
Yeah, we had, I could look at our director of information risk, but he probably doesn't want to talk right now. But
if you want.
He could give you a very detailed explanation of it, but, so basically, we had software, correct me if I'm wrong, we had software we purchased, it wasn't great value for money, it wasn't flexible enough, it didn't do the things we wanted it to do, and basically this was a better and cheaper option. So, we have a very good development team now that we didn't have a few years ago in our IT department, so we now have the capacity to be able to build these tools.
Okay, you mentioned civilianization in the HR department. I'm just wondering if there are other departments that might be appropriate for that. I did notice on page 39 of the budget document, I guess it was, analysis and intel, and I'm just wondering why would you have sworn police in there as opposed to sort of civilian researchers who are presumably cheaper?
Right. Yeah, so civilianization is something that the Victoria Police Department is continually looking at as the world evolves, job responsibilities and roles and responsibilities evolve. I can tell you that our cells, our jail guards, are civilians or special municipal constables. We used to have police officers at the front desk, no longer the case. They're special municipal constables. We've introduced special municipal constable program, which allows some of the lower level tasks, administrative in nature, that can be carried out by others. And so we want to focus the police just on core police duties. This was a no-brainer for our Human Resources Division, where we have a professional in Human Resources. You can no longer have the luxury of not having an expert in that field running your Human Resources Division, so that was a no-brainer. But those are kind of efficiencies we're looking at. As when it comes to our analysis and intelligence section, we have civilian analysts. There's no doubt about it. We have people that go to university and train and have the capability to do that. We also do have some police officers, especially when it comes to high-risk offender programs. So when we're working with community corrections, or we're working with somebody who is on parole, coming together and having a police perspective with a police lens on release somebody into the community or safety plan that may be needed. There needs to be a police level of kind of expertise and review in that, but it really is a hybrid section, and we have civilians where they're required.
Okay, great. So ongoing looking throughout the department for opportunities, I guess.
Yeah, this is something that our leadership team is looking at and will continue to do, and where there's advantages and opportunities for cost savings and internal efficiencies. It's something that we will always look at and something we share with the board as well.
Okay, thanks. And then one more question for now, which is I note the sort of attempt to keep things the same at the status quo level and then add those additional resources. Two areas where I saw small decreases. One was in domestic violence and one was IMCRT. I'm just wondering why those ones were chosen for decreases, or was that the result of some
Two
other...
different answers.
Okay.
Yeah. So you may have noticed that the increases in the integrated units were slightly lower than everywhere else. So we pay into that based on a funding formula that's reviewed every 4 years, I believe, based on a 4-factor funding formula. So our share actually decreased. So you'll notice that there's a section in there with them, so you'll see quite a lot of them have smaller increases or even decreases, and that's because our relative share dropped by just under 1% of the municipal integrated units and almost 2% of the ones that all the agencies pay into.
All for now.
Councillor Rochford.
Thank you, Chair. Just to piggyback off what our Victoria councillor commented about looking at what you're doing with positions. So the two of the positions I see that you guys talked about is the reintegration sergeant and the training constable. Why a sergeant for the reintegration sergeant? Is there a different designation, or could you be looking at something from a cost saving measure for that? And similar to your training constable.
The reintegration sergeant is a supervisory position, so the role of that individual is going to be to assist in bringing people back to work, people that are off on occupational stress injuries, physical injuries. We need a dedicated person to coordinate the process to do that, and it has got a supervisory component and responsibilities because it needs the requirement of other supervisors in the organization, and the rank is required for that. The training constable position is a position really where we are mandated more and more regularly. You heard it in our presentation around provincial policing standards, around leadership training. What we want to do is develop in-house training, have in-house expertise, develop our own curriculum, and making sure that our officers and staff receive the best, most relevant, culturally competent, trauma-informed training. So if we approach and we are a learning organization and we have officers that are going out on our streets with that, that changes really the approach of how they interact, the level of training and expertise that they have, and it's really investing in our people, and we feel there's a gap right now. We do not have that to be able to develop that. You know, we've talked about jail guards. We've talked about special municipal constables. Well, I can tell you that people rotate through many of these jobs quite often because they find employment elsewhere. In fact, sometimes we're hiring them as a regular police officer. So we need to continually manage risk, talk about risk, talk about the training component of it, and make sure we're setting our staff up for success.
Councillor Cobbins?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick statement and a question, but I really think that at least I personally think we need to be focusing on our big goal, which is looking at, over the 10-year goal, looking at the regionalization of policing, looking at the ways that we can move towards a more regional police force. And I think it's really important that we demonstrate how well we, as councils and as the police board, can work together in order to convince the others that we're pursuing, that this is worth doing over the long term, let's say a 10-year horizon. So I recently did a ride-along, and to me it really demonstrated that we were receiving high-quality policing. But the question that keeps nagging me is, how do we actually know that we're receiving cost-effective policing, which is the other side of that? And I'm curious, this question for the board is, have you examined the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Department and compared it to other police departments to ensure that we're receiving this cost-effectively? I know we hear about this, our demographics, we're a capital city, we're downtown, but when you look at the cost per capita that the province puts out in 2022, we're so outside the norm, and both in the region and provincially, that it kind of begs the question: are we being cost effective? So I'm kind of curious to hear from the board how you're ensuring that we're receiving both high quality but also cost effective policing, which is a really important part of our role as the oversight and taxation for our residents as well.
I'm going to ask the chief to give you some of the details on that, but I do know that as part of the Section 27 appeal, we get an efficiency review done of how we're operating. I think that's correct, isn't it? So we do have the province looking at us and saying that it's hard sometimes to take one police department and compare it to another without looking at what the municipalities are. I mean, we're a capital city. We get the fun of all the protests. We have a lot of late night stuff happening here. It doesn't happen in Esquimalt or Oak Bay or New Royal. So it's kind of hard when you're just looking at a small portion of a metropolitan area and saying, why are they spending so much on policing? It's context there. But I think I was encouraged by the fact that we did have an efficiency review when the province looks at the 20, and we've had several Section 27 reviews, so I think we must be very well reviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might have been released with the decision.
Bill Department. Sorry, Bill Department definitely is.
Well, we'll certainly go back tomorrow and just have a look at it, and if it's a public report, we'll be more than happy to share it. But what happened is, in one of the Section 27 reviews, the Assistant Deputy Minister hired a contractor to come in and really look closely. There's two reports that were done. One was on the financial management of the Victoria Police Department to ensure that we were operating at a high level. They were not willing to approve more money and more resources for the police department unless they saw that we were run in an efficient manner with a high level of financial oversight and management. And that report and our operational review both clearly demonstrated that the department was well run, well operated operationally, and also also the financial management was in place. And as a result of that, we were approved for the review that the board had requested that year. I think that might have been 2018 or 2019, and again, if it's a public report, be more than happy to share that. And just your comments, I think you're preaching to the converted here around the regionalization. This is something that I would ask both councils to advocate for. It is one of the recommendations. There's 11 recommendations from the Special Committee on Reviewing the Police Act. And as you know, the government's tabled that report, and they're going to probably address some of those recommendations in the spring sitting of the legislature. But I would welcome any type of advocacy that you could provide on moving ahead with one of those recommendations, which is looking at a regional approach. And I can tell you that it doesn't benefit Victoria, it benefits the region. It makes no sense in not having a regional approach to public safety. Even in the crime severity index, you look at the township, you look at the city, and you look at everyone in between. If we had a larger police department, you could scale up and scale down, even just on recruiting and retention. You'd be able to move people where the resources were needed, and if officers were feeling overworked and they had burnout working in the type of policing, they could go work in another area in Oak Bay or Central Saanich, all part of one police service instead of having to decide to resign and try to get hired elsewhere. So there's a lot of efficiencies that would happen and a lot of benefit that the region, in my view, would see.
Slightly different, this is a more technical question, but the budget documents indicate that approximately, I think it's 11% of your members are not available operationally. And I was just curious, what percentage of those are positions you're not able to fill versus people who are off on WCD-related claims?
Yeah, so this is a continued challenge that we have. The devil's in the detail. So if I look at the number of officers that we have, it ranges anywhere from 20 to 35. So our authorized strength is 255, so subtract that number. And that is a challenge. That's a significant number of officers that we have off. So also making sure that they're healthy and well. So we're trying to, again, invest up front to try to make sure that we reduce the number of officers that are going off on occupational stress injuries and then bring them back as much as we can. But I will tell you that number also includes our police recruits. Once we hire people, they're at the police academy. That number, we're paying the officers, but they're not deployable because they're at the academy receiving their training. So it encompasses a large group of physical injuries, occupational stress injuries, officers that are off on parental leave, officers that are at the police academy in training. The point though is that there's a larger number of officers that are off, which are now not filling operational seats and positions that they ought to be filling.
Just to clarify my question though, are there some of those that you guys aren't able to recruit and fill, like they're empty positions, or are they all in those categories where they're actually employed by VPD but they're not fulfilling the role?
It's a mix. So sometimes we have vacant positions just due to turnover. We're a lot better now than we were, let's say, a year or 2 years ago. We're probably close to full capacity on that. It's the percentages that we can't deploy brings down our actual deployable numbers down.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim?
Thanks. Megan. So it was mentioned in the presentation that there would be 4 targeted marketing campaigns specifically to recruit. But my understanding and recollection is that there was something already being done in terms of marketing to try to recruit. In fact, at the community center where I work, we received some of those handbills. And so did that campaign fail? And if so, what will be done differently that justifies 4 new campaigns?
Yeah, well, recruiting is an important part. Outreach and marketing is an important part. Holding our police camp that we did through the Greater Victoria Police Foundation and the new one that we're hosting in 2024 are really key in getting people interested in policing and in a career in policing. I can tell you that our staff are diligent in making sure that we are purposeful in where we want to market and how much money that we want to spend. This week, there's no secret that we have police agencies from Alberta, that are in Victoria on a long road trip, trying to recruit officers and recruits to go to Alberta. That costs a lot of money to be able to send a team of officers here into another province to do that. We don't have the budget to do that. I can tell you that we're spending our money as wisely as we can, and it's targeted campaigns that we feel are going to deliver and have a good return on investment. I wouldn't say that any of our campaigns fail. They are out to generate interest and to increase the applications that we have, or bring people in where we can at least mentor them and talk a little bit about what policing is all about and get more people through the door.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, just with a more longitudinal approach to your staff complement, I don't know what the demographic of your staff complement is, and so should we start to worry now about a wave of retirements in the coming years?
That is something that we report to regularly through our Human Resources Committee on upcoming retirements. We have a plan in place to make sure that we are recruiting heavily in the times when we know there's a greatest need of officers that we know are going to be retiring. It's a work in progress. I can tell you it's extremely challenging. There are barriers. There's barriers because many people don't want to consider policing as a career. It's not that they wouldn't want to be a police officer. I can tell you that there's misinformation out there as to what the role of the police is. And when we talk to people and they see what the police do, or they come on a ride along, it's not what their view was, whether it was through TV or through different means, that they didn't have an idea what the profession was about. But we continue to do the best job that we can, and making sure though that we are well ahead and looking 5-10 years ahead, just to your point, about what our demands and needs are going to be, and making sure that we're recruiting aggressively ahead of that. The one barrier though also is our seats at the police academy. So this is a challenge.
Okay.
The police academy only has 64 seats. They're only able to put on 3 classes in a calendar year. And we're competing against larger agencies like the Surrey Police Service and the Vancouver Police Department. And so that becomes a barrier and a challenge when we are unable to get the police academy seats to fill the vacancies that we need to fill.
Thanks. My last question is, to me it's the elephant in the room, which is the items that are under appeal with the province. I'm not getting clarity on what the consequence of that is going to be, i.e. what's the timeline for that, if you have any? Will we be on the hook if the province chooses to deny? And is that something that could end up haunting us in next year's budget cycle because they're going to deny? And to me, this comes from a concern on behalf of the public, where councils had decided not to fund it, and so I feel uncomfortable if we're going to be asked to backpedal on that decision. And so I look to you for more information on that particular potential budget item.
You asked for more clarity on this, so that's something we'd like too. Okay. We don't know what the province is going to do. Okay. We've appealed. I don't know whether it's unusual that it's taking this long. I've only been here 6 months, so maybe this is typical, but I consider it to be really dysfunctional that you could go this long without knowing what the province was going to decide. And the province could decide, as the chief said, to do it all, do part of it, do none of it. You know, we just don't know. The other thing is the way the process works, or has worked, when you end up with a Section 27 appeal again. I mean, as a newcomer to this process, I think it's crazy. It's not in my experience of how one would go about doing a budget, that you get to a disagreement, you go to a third party, and you wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, you don't know what's going to happen. That's why I'm trying to encourage you to avoid that this year. Find a way to reach agreement so that we can move forward knowing what we're doing, get into next year, start on our multi-year plans, you know, do this in a better way, because I can't imagine being in your shoes. Your council was new last year, you know, I think you were new last year, sitting there looking at a police budget and saying, well, I don't know what to cut out of here. So it's not I don't think it's a sensible process, and I think we need to change it, and with your help, we can.
And so just to be clear, we don't know, any of us,
No.
who might be on the hook for any of this.
Well, it depends on what the province decides. If they go for the whole thing, I think it's, 2.95% added on to everything else, but we don't know what they will approve.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Boardman.
Thank you. Other than retirement, can you tell me why you people leave VicPD?
Yeah, so this is something that our Human Resources Division does, is there's an exit interview for all our staff that are leaving. We always are looking for themes and trends of why people leave. There's a variety of reasons. We've had staff, civilian staff and police officers leave for personal reasons. We've had people leave for a burnout, and they're just tired of the type of policing that happens, and for the same wage, they can go work in a nearby municipality or somewhere else. To do that, sometimes one of the things sometimes is cited as what they feel is not supportive councils. Some of our new recruits, I can tell you, have shared with us when budgets don't get passed, phoning us from the police academy, asking if their job is now in jeopardy because they've just bought a new house or a new condo and they've got a mortgage to pay. And so a lot of younger officers actually choose other police departments in the region where they feel that there's greater support and greater, because they feel that if there is going to be layoffs, the youngest, most junior people will be laid off. And so these are some of the barriers that we're dealing with in the region. People do want to come to Victoria, they do want to work here. We do everything that we can to make sure that we're looking for themes and trends, and if there's changes we can make in our workplace to improve the workplace, provide mental health service and supports to keep people, that investment pays dividends rather than people resigning well ahead of their retirement date.
Thank you. Can you tell me when the last time we had layoffs were?
Well before I joined policing, I think that this, sorry, what was it?
I think it was around 1984 with Mayor Peter Paula.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago. But I'm telling you though, the reality of it is that whether you had them in the 1980s in the city or not since, it is a real concern for a lot of people that are choosing a policing career. Do I go here? Especially when there's multiple offers for people to go to multiple police departments. Many of them are choosing to go to where they feel there's going to be greater stability. And again, that is just the reality of the situation that we're dealing with. Now, people still come to VicPD that are reserve officers that have come up through through working at VicPD because they know what it's like to work here. But these are things that we're trying to inform our recruits on, and also talk to our candidates who are applying to the department, that there is job security and that they're here to stay.
Okay, just another question. Can you tell me how long the police training is? And also if you're advocating to the Justice Institute for more seats annually, what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, so it's a step process. The police academy is, there's 3 blocks. So block 1 is in New Westminster at the Justice Institute. It's usually 12 to 14 weeks. And then block 2, the recruits then come back to their home departments for to work under the leadership of a field trainer. And so it's basically their practical experience. And so it's 12 to 14 weeks for block 1. Block 2 is now been extended, what is it in? 4.5 months. So 4.5 months they're working, learning a little bit about more of the things that they learned in the classroom. And then what they do is after that practical experience, they then go back to the police academy for about another 10 to 12 weeks, at which time they graduate. Yeah, and so advocating for the seats, the second part of your question, this is a challenge. The police academy have already told us that they cannot go above 64 seats. That is their limit, that is their capacity to carry on with training, so there's consistent pressure. So usually VicPD is offered 6 to 8 seats per class. As I mentioned, there's 3 classes a year, but our need in many cases is much greater than that. So this is where we have to then focus on bringing experienced officers in who don't have to go to the police academy.
right, I have two police board members that put their hands up, so I'm just going to interrupt my question list. Holly Corbin.
I don't need the microphone. I just want to actually ask the room here, how many of the counselors have been on a ride-along with either the Esquimalt or the Victoria Police? So what I want to say is, when in response to Councillor Boardman's question, why do police officers leave? They are very transparent. If you go on a ride-along with either Victoria or the Esquimalt Police, you will get one of the more senior officers, and they will be very transparent with you about what is going on in the police force and what is happening on the streets, and what they're seeing, and things they're happy with, things they wish could change. All of these things are out there for you guys to experience, and I cannot recommend highly enough, or strongly enough I should say, to engage in that process. This is part of the process around where are we putting our money and what are we going to approve, but it is very challenging if you do not go and experience what policing actually looks like, for you to make a determination on where money should be spent. So I think it's really, really important, if you have not participated both in Esquimalt and Victoria, so that you can also see the differences, that you engage in that process as soon as you possibly can. In order to be making these types of decisions, that is something that is an absolute must for you to do, in my opinion.
Thank you. And Charlotte Hoover.
I just wanted to respond to your questions on JIBC. So aside from being on the Victoria Esquimalt Police Board, I just finished a 2-year term as president of the BC Association of Police Boards. And JIBC and the seats are a struggle all across the province. So the hard part is, if we're advocating for more seats, every other department is advocating for more seats. And I believe it was just a couple hires ago that, well, I don't remember how many you hired, 4 or 5, but there weren't even enough seats to have them trained. So one person had to stay back and do admin, waiting for their seat, and the rest of their cohort got to go forward. So the whole JIBC thing is a struggle province-wide, and when I was president, it was so frustrating, like talking to police services every single meeting about how do we fix this.
Thank you. Board Member Tim Katuri.
Thank you. I am new as a board member. Elizabeth and I started 6 months ago. So 6 months ago, we walked into police headquarters for the first time. A building I had tried to avoid every time. And now I'm there right now. So it has been mentioned how hard Elizabeth has worked on this, as coming in with such fresh eyes, the support of the chief, support of Steve. We sit in those chairs and we talk. I have been surprised, honestly, by the level of camaraderie that I've experienced sitting on the board, the support, the competence, the energy, the effectiveness. I have witnessed chief and senior leadership work together. I have witnessed the respect, the curious questions that they have for each other. So I am confident that while there's some work to be done, I think this is a good place to be. I am also on the HR committee as the chair, so a lot of these questions I am jotting down, I'm paying attention, I'm listening. These are the things I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking about diversity on the police force that represents our communities. I'm thinking about mental health. I'm thinking about a lot of things. 6 months ago, I would not pay attention, but I hear a siren go on and my heart starts beating and palpitating. I'm like, is this one of us? Is this someone that I know? Yes, I leave it at that, but I'm grateful that these questions are deep, they're thoughtful. I am also very grateful that they are questions that we have asked and that we have had these conversations in different spaces. But I appreciate the camaraderie, I appreciate the support. I am a proud resident of Esquimalt, and so this is great. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. So now I'll go back to the speaking list, and I have Thompson, Cardona, and Rochford.
Thanks again, Chair. Just want to talk about measurement. So when we're looking at crime rates or crime severity index or cost effectiveness, trying to measure cost effectiveness, generally we need comparators. And what I see is that most of the comparators that I've seen so far in this discussion and in public discussions are not suitable because they don't face the same core periphery challenge where we've got the concentration of need and concentration of costs in the core. I'm just wondering, in looking across BC and Canada, maybe outside of Canada, are there any municipalities that are suitable comparators that have that core separation easily?
There's not many at all. We do look at that. Most regions, similar to the Capital Regional District here, have a regional service and a regional approach. You look at Ottawa with Nepean and Gloucester, you look at Halifax Regional, you can look at all other parts of the country. Mainly, very few police departments exist similar to VicPD, which is you've got the downtown urban core and all the kind of businesses, and then you don't have the resources from the suburbs to offset some of the high crime and the high volume of calls and the protests. And of course, what even makes it more challenging is we're a capital city. So that in itself also brings additional challenges. But I can tell you that my colleagues across the country struggle with this when it comes to looking at metrics and comparables. You have a widget factory, you can have, here's the output, here how efficient are we, what do we need to do? There's so many variables to play when it comes to crime trends. And sometimes we look at it, we give ourselves a pat on the back, but is it really good, effective policing? Or is it other factors, socioeconomical factors that kind of come into play as a result of it? So this is not a struggle, but it's something that we're aware of about measuring, because we always talk about return on investment. If we're starting a new program, how do we know that that program is actually successful for the investment that we make in it? But those are things that we have regular discussions about across the province and across the country.
Okay. I hear you on regionalization and advocating for it, and I'm sure everybody here has been advocating for it. I've also spoken with police officers outside of Victoria and Esquimalt police who say, I'm totally opposed to regionalization. They don't want to do it. And the province probably regards it as a political hot potato, and I think they've been asked by, I think every government has been asked for the last 20 years, and they've all said no. Have we tried asking them, okay, don't regionalize us, but cover the incremental cost that Victoria faces above Oak Bay, Saanich, that sort of thing? Have we tried that out?
I don't know what attempts have been made at the political level. Maybe the mayors can kind of comment on that. But I can tell you, it's usually a short conversation, and people don't talk to us probably for a couple days after that. Generally. But I would say that I think everything should be on the table. Like, I honestly think that public safety is that important, and you have to look at the sustainability. None of us live and work and never go outside of the municipality that we're living in. I mean, everyone is going all over the region, and we just need to modernize. Again, I use this analogy. If we had a blank slate and you had to draw in where the borders were and how many police departments would be where, you would never draw it up. And there's a reason why you wouldn't draw it up the way it is. So I think really what I'm looking for is leadership. This is a decision for the provincial government, and I'm hoping that after the next election, I'm not sure what much will happen between now and the next election, but when that mandate is given to whichever government is successful, that there's already, we're one step further. There's a special committee, an all-party committee, that looked at 11 recommendations that they have made, and they met with hundreds of community groups, many that support policing, many that don't, and they've come up with these recommendations, and one of them was a regional approach to policing, and I believe that the CRD is probably a pilot that the province could start on to see how successful it really can be.
I'll just say I've been at this table for 15 years, and we have done just about every possible thing we could do. And I'll let Mary Ann add her 2 cents. Just a follow-up, I'm sitting on the UBCM committee with regard to providing input to the special committee recommendations. That committee was supposed to wrap up this fall. We are continuing into the spring, and just recently they've asked us to double up on extra meetings in the spring. So there's still a lot of work going on. But I can say, just in terms of broader discussions, there's not many people talking about regionalization, despite the fact that that is a recommendation. So I want to keep you to our time frame, and I want to keep to my speakers list. So I'll keep going, and I have Cardona and Rochford, and then Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up on some other, return to some topics that we discussed already, but I want to ask one question and then make a request. Starting with the question, I think it's no secret that there's a possibility of a conscious uncoupling between Victoria and Esquimalt, and no one can predict the future, and we don't know how or when that might happen. But let's just assume it does happen at some point in the next few years. What are the risks of these pretty substantial staffing up asks that could potentially have a negative impact or create complexities if that conscious uncoupling does occur?
Well, I certainly hope you're wrong. I'll start off with that. I think the goal here is to find efficient and effective policing for every region, including the township. It's a decision that the provincial government will make, but they'll look at overall public safety, no different than what they attempted to do with Surrey and that transition from the RCMP to a municipal police department. But I can tell you that the way to go is to look at regionalization. Again, there's a report sitting with the government that has that recommendation, and there's a reason for that recommendation. I think that we need to look at overall sustainability of policing costs. And what's the ability? We have to look at the complexity of policing. We have to look at where the trends are going. When we look at online crime, and we look at child sexual exploitation, and we look at bullying and harassment, which no longer is at schools and on the playground. It's digitally in the hands of every 10-year-old kid and higher. So I think we have to look at where the crime trends are, even cryptocurrency investigations and whatnot, which have quadrupled over the last number of years. So I think when we're looking at policing, you're going to find, as the UK has found, that online crime is actually a larger percentage, more than 50% of it, than traditional crime, which is theft from autos or robbery. If somebody can sit in front of their computer and defraud somebody for thousands of dollars, why would they go to a convenience store to go hold them up for $100? So I think that when you look at modernization, you look at where the policing is going and the complexity of policing. I talked earlier in my presentation about standards, the latest ones coming out in intimate partner violence. There's more specialization in policing and public safety. The only way forward, in my view, is to have consolidated and have experts and also have other mechanisms in place that can do other work that the police currently do today. We really need to reimagine policing and modernize where policing has been and not look at the traditional model that we've kind of come from. So I think if you look at policing through that lens, you will see a much, much different outcome than continuing to kind of evolve and shift the current model that we have, which I think needs to be modernized significantly.
Okay, thanks for that. The request is, would it be possible for the two councils to have high-level provisional projections on staffing and resourcing needs prior to us making our final decisions on budget 2024? So let's say within the next 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a long-term plan that takes a while to develop.
Provisional.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I see an issue. We're talking about multi-year budgeting. We don't know what model of policing we're going to be delivering in 5 years' time. So we could develop long-term planning for resources based on status quo, but that may not be what actually happens.
But it would be okay with me if you made some assumptions and just bake them in there. Because the reason I asked the question is that what we're contemplating here is what could amount to 11 new positions this year. And I gather and I understand that that's partly divided between this year's ask and stuff that falls to Section 27. But 11 positions is a lot of positions. And I'm sure there's no department in the city of Victoria that wouldn't love to have 11 new positions. And we're under intense pressure from our tax base, our taxpayers, to keep taxes low. And this 2.4 to 3.7% gets passed straight on to John Q. taxpayer, who's already paying high taxes due to all the other inflationary pressures that we're experiencing as a municipality. So for me as a decision maker, it would be extremely helpful to know what the future looks like, at least at a high level. Are we looking at another 10 positions next year, and then 10 positions the year after that, and then another 10? Because as important as the work is you do, and of course it's crucially important, it's already 23% of our budget. So where does this end? It would be very helpful to know if next year you're okay on staffing. And I can think as a decision maker, okay, I can handle 11 new positions. That's a lot of new positions, but I know next year there's not a huge demand because we just filled 11. But if I know that there's another 11 positions that are required next year, well, that would be factored into the decisions that I'm forced to make. So having some long-term context, even if it's provisional and it's not perfect and it's at a high level, would be extraordinarily useful for us to have in the next few months.
I think I would have to defer to our finance chair, because that would have to be something that would come back through the finance committee. I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying it's something we would have to discuss, what level, what kind of information we would bring back through our committee, and on what timeline that would look like.
Please.
The challenge, there's a couple of challenges there. I mean, we could do it. The fact that there's a very short period of time to do it means that it may not be very accurate. But if we're looking at something going forward for some period of time, next year we should be able to give you a better idea for that. The other thing is, we've got this other unknown. We don't know what's happening with the framework agreement. The divorce, as Councillor Levin called it, that she doesn't want, but we don't know. So we can plan that all on, like, what are our assumptions? You know, stay together, you know, joint custody, you know.
But even if there's transparency about those assumptions,
Yep.
we could at least take them into account, or there could be 2 or 3 different scenarios.
We could do something like that, but I do caution you that it will be sort of, I won't say back of the envelope kind of stuff, but it's not going to be something that you can take to the bank. It's gonna, there's too many unknowns for us to be able to say, yeah, this is what it'll be next year, next year, next year. We need to get into that. We need to get a couple of the unknowns sorted out, like the framework agreement, and we also need to then do our multi-year budgeting based on the reality that we have at the time. So we could assume that the current state's the way it's going to go and build out from that. But that doesn't mean that that's where we'll be. So
I thank you and I appreciate that to the chair, and I think that would be extraordinarily helpful, even if it's provisional and faulty, because just speaking only for myself here, if I get the impression that next year you're good on positions, more or less, I mean, obviously there's always more positions one could have, but for right now you're good, it's easy for me to say, yeah, okay, 11 positions, let's do it. They're up to their full complement, we don't have to deal with this next year, and it won't be as big of a budgetary ask. But if I know there's 5 more, 7 more, 9 more positions constantly coming down the pipe, well, I have to take that into account. So I think for me, and others are welcome to chime in, but I think it would be extraordinarily useful, even if it's imperfect information.
I think that's a great, it's a great question, and we'll take that away and try to figure out what we can do with it, with all the caveats that I mentioned. But it sounds like you understand that, so I think we could do something that, looking over my shoulder here
All
at
right,
Steve.
well, I think we've got an answer, so we'll move on, and I have Councillor Rochford.
Right, thanks. I'm glad that the councillor said that he was asking that question, not the rest of us. So I'll leave that there. My question is back to the Justice Institute, because I find it disheartening to hear that. I get across the province, everywhere struggling for positions, but we're telling an officer you can't go. We know we have a need. What can we do other than yell at government, which anyone who knows me knows I'm okay doing that, to ensure we're getting the spots we need, the officers we do have who do want to come in? Because yes, I do understand getting experienced officers is beneficial, but when I do look at retirement rates, getting fresh blood, as we shall call it, in is also equally important to learn from some of those officers. So I guess my ask to you, Chief, and to everyone else is, what can we do to try to advocate harder from you folks to ensure you're getting those positions at the Justice Institute?
Thank you for your question. First, I want to just offer a point of clarification. I mentioned a couple times that the new standards coming in were for intimate partner violence, actually for sexual assault investigations. That's what they're going to be coming in for. Yeah, this is something that has been flagged through, you heard Charlotte talk about it when she was president of the BC Association of Police Boards. This is something that's on their radar. This has been brought to the minister's attention. We are talking about building more capacity at the police academy with now knowing that the final decision has been made on the transition for Surrey to a municipal police department. There's going to be increased demands. There is talk about starting up another satellite police academy on the Lower Mainland to take away some of the capacity challenges that they're having with the police academy. I don't know how long that'll be, if they have to build a new building or they're moving into an existing building perhaps that might have an opportunity to kind of just change some workspace around. So there are talks kind of going on at a very high level. Nothing that we'll see probably the next 3 years, but those discussions are happening. I will tell you that we have offered the police academy an opportunity to have a satellite office here. We would love nothing more than to have a smaller police academy, so Saanich police recruits and Victoria police recruits can be trained here. It saves us a bunch of money, otherwise have to pay them per diem and hotel and their accommodation on the mainland. If it's in our backyard, they go home to their family, and certainly they would appreciate that as well. That hasn't received a lot of traction because the number of seats we would open up is a small number, comparatively speaking. If you're looking at 64 seats, if they do it on the Lower Mainland, they can give us more seats, but they're able to take away a greater number to free up a greater number of officers to be trained. So those are discussions, nothing in the immediate kind of future, but we're trying to really lobby government and the police academy for increased capacity.
All right, we certainly appreciate the questions around advocacy, but given that we have a finite amount of time tonight, what I would like to do is suggest that we focus to the budget and the budget presentation, that each council has a representative at the board table. Victoria, not right now, but you certainly have the mayor. And such that if there are ideas around wanting to advocate for things, we can focus that in from the board's perspective to be able to provide some information out for councils. And if you want and require, we can have another meeting on what can we do together to advocate. So I'm going to continue down my list. We have about 15 minutes left, and I'm being generous. So I have first time speaker Mark Gardner.
Thank you, through the mayor, and to Elizabeth Colmer, wherever she is right now. Part of the police workload is determined a bit by the policies of the councils, and I quite appreciate that. So chiming in, as has been expressed, if we look at, if you really want to make a 5-year plan, and someone wants to stick you to it, maybe you better ask the councils to look at their 5-year plans, which might assist the police board in planning forward. Because a lot of what's going on right now, especially in the city of Victoria, has been driven, not a lot, quite a bit of it, let's say, big segment of it, by decisions made by, over the last several years by council. And so you have my great sympathy, empathy in trying to create a 5-year program that actually may be quite rational. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. I have Krista Loughton, Councillor Loughton.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I have a question really specifically about a line item in the budget. So under the community engagement division, the volunteer program is up quite a bit, 17.6%, but the community programs are up 135.6%. I just wondered, what does that look like? What are we talking about?
It's a couple of specific things. So the volunteer program, it's not a big dollar item, but it's big for the volunteer program. It's parking. So we used to get away with parking for free at Royal Athletic with just a sign in the windows for the volunteers, and we didn't get ticketed. Those days are over, so now we have to buy parking. So we've actually had to go out and buy a parking spot across the road from the police department. It's not fair to ask volunteers to come in and pay for their own parking when they're working for free. And we get a lot of hours out of those volunteers. The community programs is actually the cultural liaison officer, and that's a position that was approved in the 2022 budget. It was originally going to be under the community resources section, but that section has now been consolidated into outreach. This position is specifically for cultural liaison.
Great, thanks for that. And just quickly, I know we don't want to get off track here, but for the advocacy, you mentioned us getting together. I think that's a great idea. And then we can also talk about regionalization and how the framework plays into that. So I would vote to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hellawell.
My question's been asked, thank you.
All right. Suddenly I came to the end of my list. Are there any further questions? Councillor Cavan.
Just a clarification of one line in the document. It talks about the appeal to the province, and there's a line here that says that it should also be noted that if any of the items considered core are not approved, these expenditures will likely be incurred regardless.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of curious what that means from a budget process and what that means from what we're doing. If we refuse something, the province refuses it,
Yes, and we're going to have to relook at our budget. Yes, so there are a couple of specific items in there that have an operational impact. One of the line items that was reduced last year was the building maintenance line item. So in the interim, what we've done is we basically suspended everything. We can't keep doing that forever. We've done no maintenance, we've done no office moves, we've got people scrunched up, we canceled a project. Short term we can get away with that, long term we can't. So that item has not been included in the 2024 budget because it is still under consideration as part of Section 27. And the other part was the professional services, which the same thing, there was a portion of it that was not approved in the budget. We still need those services. So we still need computer forensic services. We still went ahead with the psychological services for the well-being of the officers. So those expenses are being incurred regardless of the fact that we don't have it in the budget, just because we can't not spend the money.
Other questions? All right. I want to, on behalf of the board, thank both councils for your thoughtful probing questions and your thoughts around what else can we do together. These are great conversations to have. One of the things that the board did in preparation for this was to have police services governance representative come to the board and speak to us around who else has these challenges around not accepting budgets. And what we heard is very few, that there is less than a handful of other organizations that have this challenge. And so this is where Ms. Cull's plea comes from in terms of how can we work together on this to come up with what makes sense. We also learned that there are various other steps and ways that we can look at the budget if we're running into troubles. And I know that that's not going to happen, but if it does happen, then we can start exploring those as well. So we have a little bit of a toolbox this time where we didn't have it in the past. Again, thank you everyone. Thank you to staff for being here, and appreciate you coming out. I don't even need a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned.